I would like to welcome Commissioner of Development Services, Arvind Prasad, to deliver opening remarks.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Markville Secondary Plan Study Community Information Meeting number 1. This evening's session will provide you with an overview of the Markville Secondary Plan Study, in particular its project timelines, study objectives. It'll summarize the work that has been undertaken to date. But also today, and very importantly, we will also collect preliminary feedback to support the development of a community vision and guiding principles for the Markville Secondary Plan area. So to start off with, I'd like to welcome and acknowledge the following members of council with us this evening. Today, in no particular order, just as I see them on my screen here, I see Councillor Keith Irish, Councillor Andrew Keys, Councillor Reed McAlpine. If you could please mute your microphones.
The little dots and do rename.
Please mute your microphone. Thank you. Councillor Reed McAlpine, Councillor Isa Lee, I see. Councillor Rich Lau. And let's see who else we have here. Oh, I see Karen Ray. Councillor Karen Ray is here. I think that's it. Just looking through here. I'm not sure if Councillor. I think that's it. But anyway, if I missed someone, we'll catch you later. We also have with us City of Markham CAO, Andy Taylor. Welcome. So at this point, I'd like to pass it over to Mayor Frank Scarpitti for a pre-recorded message. Unfortunately, the mayor had a prior commitment tonight and is unable to join us this evening, but he was gracious enough to provide us with some pre-recorded introductory remarks and also to provide the land acknowledgement. So thank you. I look forward to your feedback on this exciting project today. So let's key up the mayor's message, please.
Good evening. I want to welcome and thank all of you for joining us tonight as we work together on an important city building initiative to plan for the future of the Markville area. Markham's long-term vision is to develop a sustainable and complete community. Several initiatives are currently underway across the city to realize this vision, including work on secondary plans for Markham Center, Milliken, Markham Road, Mountjoy, and the Markville area. Now, all this work will ensure that the development and changes in these areas will meet the needs of the people who live, work, or visit them. This is where you come in and why your ideas and feedback are so important. Unfortunately, I'm unable to participate this evening due to a prior commitment with York Regional Council. But I wanted to say just a few words to let you know that secondary plan processes are critical to plan for services and amenities to support the community. Now, with this in mind, I'd like to begin this evening by acknowledging the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples and their commitment to the stewardship of the land. We acknowledge the communities in Circle, the north, west, south, and eastern directions, and Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, Seneca, Chippewa, and the current treaty holders, Mississaugas of the Credit Peoples. We share the responsibility with the caretakers of this land to ensure that the dish is never empty and to restore relationships that are based on peace, friendship, and trust. We here at the City of Markham are committed to reconciliation, partnership, and enhanced understanding. As we begin the process tonight, I want to stress that the Markville Secondary Plan area is one of Markham's key development areas. There's already key landmarks here, including Markville Mall, the Centennial Community Center, a well-established employment area east of McCowan Road, north of Highway 7, the Centennial GO station, and a proposed McCowan Bus Rapid Transit Station. The city has begun the Markville Secondary Plan Study to support the development of a sustainable and complete community. The study will address the different types of uses, quality of urban design, transportation, and the municipal servicing that will be required. I look forward to receiving your comments and input as they will help shape how this community grows and evolves over time. With that, again, thanks to all of you for coming out and participating tonight. And now I'll turn it over to staff and the consultant team that will lead the virtual information meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Scarpitti, and welcome everyone. Very, very many of you tonight to this meeting. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and participating in this meeting. I always find it really, really amazing to see how community members are so active in planning and in their community. And I'm really impressed by the volume and the number of people here today. So thank you very much for that. You've already heard in Mayor Scarpitti's message the importance of this project and the land acknowledgement. So why are we here today and what are we going to speak about? We're going to deliver opening remarks, which you've already heard from Commissioner Arvind Prasad. I will take you through a brief overview of the meeting objectives and the purpose of this meeting. We're going to go into some details on how to participate in this interactive meeting. We will introduce the key project team members and a very large contingent of staff that are here today to hear your questions. And then you're going to be hearing a presentation on the overview of the Markville Secondary Plan Study, followed by a question period where, again, I will go over how to participate. We're going to close the meeting this evening with a very high-level wrap-up of next steps. And again, for those of you joining late, this meeting is being recorded and will be available. So why are we meeting today? The purpose of this meeting is to really introduce you to the project team, to provide an overview of the study objectives and project timelines, and to summarize some of the work that's been undertaken to date on this project. We're also going to provide a high-level summary of our engagement program. Again, this is the first step in that program, and some exciting visioning that will be taking place in the near future. And at the question period, we really look forward to collecting preliminary feedback and questions from you to really develop a community vision for the Markville Secondary Plan and allow for opportunities to ask any questions of clarification before we move into visioning with the community in the next few weeks. So how to participate in this meeting? There are a number of ways. There are a number of people right now that have called in. So if you happen to be calling in through a telephone, please mute your telephone. You can do that by pressing *6 if you are not already muted. And during the question period at the end of this meeting, you will have the ability to ask a question by raising your hand should you wish to. And you can do that by pressing *9. In addition to those calling today by phone, we have a number that might be on mobile phone and or laptop computer. Please ensure that your microphone is muted. You will have the ability to also raise your hand using the icons at the bottom of your screen. And we will be accepting the majority of questions this evening using the chat function. So kindly go through that now. If you'd like to be testing that out, you can send myself, Christine Furtado, a chat. We will also be having some interactive polling questions to break up the presentation this evening. We will be using a free tool called Mentimeter that is applicable across all devices to engage you this evening in a few questions. There will be a unique code provided that you can see on your screen, and you can participate using Menti in really 3 ways. If you have your mobile phone handy and available, kindly take a picture of the QR code on your screen, and you will be able to access the Menti. Questions will come up on your mobile phone as we progress through the presentation. If you are calling on your telephone, you can use a computer nearby in your house or your phone to access Mentee at www.mentee.com and enter the unique digit code there, 51855928. And finally, if you're on your laptop computer, my colleague Natalie is going to be entering a link into the chat that can be accessed to engage in questions throughout the presentation. If at any time you have a question, we will be monitoring the chat, and please feel free to use that. So we are going to test the Mentee to see if it works. I'd like to ask everybody on the call, before we jump into the presentation and introductions, how did you hear about this meeting today? So I'll turn it over to my colleague Natalie to see the results of this question. It
And
looks like
Natalie, while that's happening, I'd like to acknowledge Regional Councillor Jim Jones has joined us this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Prasad. Welcome. So it looks like we have successfully used Mentimeter, which is fantastic. We have 12 and more incoming responses, which is really wonderful to see. And it seems as though a majority of meeting participants today heard about this meeting via email, their ward counselor, from a friend, signboards, and even counselor newsletters. So bravo to the City of Markham on some excellent outreach to the community and a wonderful showing of staff and community members here today to this meeting. Thank you very much. So throughout the presentation, there's going to be 2 or 3 opportunities where we can ask polling questions just like this, and we'll continue along. So at this time, I'd like to pass the torch over to our consultant team. But before I do that, there are a number of introductions and staff that are on the call today. I'd like to welcome key staff, Daryl Lyons, the Deputy Director, Duran Wedderburn, the Manager, Policy, and Liliana De Silva, Senior Planner. If you can give a wave. I'd also like to welcome the variety of city staff on the call today. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to give a wave as well, that would be great. And there are a number of other people that make up this team for the study. I'd like to welcome John Tassiopoulos, who is the consultant team project manager, as well as staff from DTA, Brent Raymond, and Chris Veris, who are part of our urban design lead team. With that, there are a number of other people that are engaged in this process. And if at any time you have questions following this meeting, contact information for city staff are on the screen. With that, I'm going to pass the presentation over to John Tassiopoulos. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Usually it's a very busy time for everyone, even after the break, but I appreciate everybody. We've had a really great turnout, so we're looking forward to it. Just as a quick sort of introduction in terms of our timeline for the project, we're now at in Q1 of 2023. There was a lot of earlier phases, a couple of earlier phases that you can get an idea of, where we initiated the project last year in late spring, and were able to do a lot of background review and data collection during the end of spring and through the summer. And because of delays, obviously, with the elections that were coming on, we continued to do that background review work, understanding the community, understanding the study area and its various technical and community aspects. And this leads us up to our current phase, which is phase 3 and the first community information meeting. Just so that you know that this isn't the last time. If you look at the bottom, you'll notice that there is another community information meeting that we've indicated, and that we're still figuring out where that falls, but you can be rest assured that it's somewhere either before the summer, after the summer, and early fall, where we get we have something to actually show the public and to provide you with the information that's going to be, or to provide you with a development concept that's going to be a result of the information we hear tonight, and also with the development concepts that are developed based on the background information and the work that we continue to do on this project. Next slide. So with that, I just wanted to sort of give a little bit of a project background and just the approach that sort of guides us initially when we first started the project and continues to guide the project. Our approach is based on 4 fundamental principles, and it's the first is providing an integrated and iterative approach to what we do, so that we understand as we move along and are able to adjust and change as we go along. But it's also to make sure that we're informed by all of the disciplines that we've compiled to help us in this study. The other is that we rely on expert-led background research. Our goal there is obviously to, if you notice in the previous slide, we have a very multidisciplinary team that provides all sorts of assistance with respect to transportation, urban design, market and real estate analysis, community and services facilities, our engagement team, which is helming us tonight. And we also included a youth engagement professional to help us to reach out to a greater range of students and so on that quite often do not get involved in our in some of these meetings. So it's really important for us to be meaningful. So next slide. What do we mean by if you want to go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. What do we mean by my apologies. What do we mean by vibrant and mixed use? When we're talking about creating vibrant and mixed use communities, we're trying to demonstrate how new communities, which this study area starts to give us some input into, how we can incorporate a mix of housing types, a mix of uses. How do we ensure that employment that's already been functioning for quite a while in the study area continues, and how do we integrate the community services, and how do we enhance them where more would be needed for a community that would be designed around this area. And then, as I mentioned before, the meaningful engagement is quite important. So a little bit about the study area. It's indicated as an intensification area that requires a secondary plan, and this is to create a framework and a guide for development in the study area. It is comprised of approximately 110 hectares, and it contains various types of social and environmental economic features. As many of you well know, it is surrounded by a lot of natural heritage features in the southwest side, and surrounding residential areas that frame a lot of the study area that we're in. The next slide. So in terms of a policy context, I'll try and keep this really quick and brief. In the York Region Official Plan, the area is located in what the region identifies as an urban area, and it's the area in which you focus growth and intensification within the region. It also encourages complete communities. You heard me say earlier about mixed and a range of community uses and housing options. There is an identification of a target of at least 200 people and jobs per hectare for the overall study area. You notice the last bullet there, we have a connection. This will be posted eventually, and you'll be able to link for those of you that may want to go directly to the region's official plan. Next slide. So when we move to the city's official plan. We see further emphasis on this, and you can see the study area within this, within the image that's illustrated. And this is identified again in the official plan, and Markham's official plans as an intensification area and as a key development area. What does that mean? That's a mix of uses, including mixed use, mid-rise, high-rise, low-rise, employment uses, and a portion of in the west side of McCown, which includes a lot of the employment area uses or the bulk drive employment area. In the official plan, it envisions that this would become a complete community. That means accommodating both residential, retail, and employment uses within the study area. Next slide.
Thank you, John. So we're going to do a break and we're going to ask a question of our audience. When asked to describe the Markville area today, what key words come to mind? So again, using the mentee code, the unique code at the top, we'd like you to input your ideas. When asked to describe the Markville area today, what key words come to mind? Hearing a little bit about some of the existing conditions, some of the policies around this area, shopping, of course, definitely density, mass transit, public square. If for whatever reason you can't submit your comment through Mentee, please feel free to send us a note in the chat. We'll give about 30 seconds. And again, this can stay online throughout the duration of the meeting. So if you'd like to add your feedback, you can, no rush. What's unique about this poll is that the bigger the word, the more frequently it was received. So it looks like traffic. Oh, we've got heritage, someone in the chat saying heritage, traffic, shopping, it's busy, it's car centric, there's too many cars, massive parking lot, detached housing, lack of cycling infrastructure, dangerous. This is great. Thank you very much for your feedback. In the interest of time, we're going to move on and continue with the presentation. So John will now talk about the preliminary findings from the existing conditions analysis that the project team is currently completing.
So as I mentioned at the beginning, there's been a lot of background review and analysis that's been conducted since the beginning of the study. So I'm going to try, hopefully I can get through this quickly and not be too quick that some of the stuff is not understood, but I'm hoping I'll be as clear and concise as possible. And of course, any questions at the end of the presentation, we'll be able to deal with that at that point as well. So can we just go to the next slide? Oh, I'm sorry. Can we go to the previous slide? My apologies. I've got a bit of a lag here. The images that we've got here, they're just very, very quickly, just to illustrate the study area and the particular locations within the study area, including the high-rise residential building at the southwest corner of the study area to the west, and the Markville Mall, of course, the intersection at Bullock Drive and McCowan, the Centennial Community Center, all sort of features, as well as the auto-oriented kind of service that exists in the eastern portion of the study area along Laidlaw Boulevard. The predominant built form, as you can see from the photos themselves, and which you probably all well know, is a low rise, and in terms of retail and services, and the mall makes up a significant portion of the study area lands. Next slide. So in terms of land uses, what proceeded was the built form and the land use condition as it exists today. The intent of the city's official plan is that this secondary plan area includes mixed use residential development that it continues to maintain employment uses, including auto-oriented uses, that it's pedestrian friendly, and that it's supportive of transit. The idea of being a transit-oriented type of community, as the study area itself is both within a major transportation station area and the transit corridor that's along Highway 7. While looking at further developing the area through a mix of land uses, as I mentioned, one of the aspirations is to protect the existing employment lands that are predominantly found east of McCown Road, as we've already identified as the Bullock Drive employment area. Next slide. So in terms of the existing street network, it's indicative of the land uses which are present there right now. It results in large blocks with, as you can see, 5 streets really in total in the whole area. And wonderful. The reason these were designed around the existing land use, which prioritizes vehicular movement over other types of movements, such as pedestrian or cycling. That's why you get these large blocks with these very large distances separated, besides the fact that you obviously have a shopping mall as well. One of the opportunities we have in this study is to look at how we can create more connectivity for all users and for transit, and to encourage easier access to all those types of active transportation uses through a more connected community, and find those opportunities within the study area as it evolves to do that and to build on it, along with considering what additional park spaces may be required when you develop new mixed-use residential, and what kind of community facilities and services may be required to ensure that you've got libraries and schools and community centers that help round out the already existing surrounding facilities and services. Next slide. So given the existing land uses, parks and open spaces are found, as you can see on the image, at the periphery of the study area, with the exception of Markham Centennial Park, which is really the only park within the study area. Good reason for that, right next to the community center and adjacent right to the residential community that's just to the north of the study area. All the other parks indicated are, they are outside the study area with a significant open space park system found along the Rouge River. There's also in the existing conditions, there's a lack of tree planting, or it's not sort of organized internally, and street trees in general it's deficient, except along some major streets like Highway 7 and so on. So there's an opportunity through this study to help create park and open spaces, better streetscapes that are pedestrian supportive and have street tree planting to help reinforce and support pedestrian circulation, as well as improve connections to existing open spaces. So the idea is, when we think about parks and open spaces, we don't think of them just as places to drive to, but how do we connect what would go into the Markville Secondary Plan area? How do we connect those with, as you can see, all the surrounding park spaces? What's the best way of creating, so to speak, a circuit where we can have these spaces, we can move through these spaces seamlessly. Next slide. So the following images sort of provide an indication of the surrounding open spaces, Centennial Park, the hardscape portion that you can see in the lower left-hand side, and sort of that pedestrian quality along the pedestrian boulevard quality along Highway 7. Next slide. So in terms of existing built form, it's as you notice in the initial photos, it's comprised of 1- and 3-story buildings that are set back quite a ways from the street, which they're indicative of their use, but they do create very little relationship to the street boulevard, because the front yards themselves are composed of parking areas. So you have sort of that break between what happens along the boulevard and the pedestrian boulevard and what happens at the building. So you've got that breakup of connectivity. This study will put forward approaches through our very capable urban designers to examine how buildings can better define and relate to the streets, and how the public spaces that we have through them, the public spaces themselves can be also dealt with through siting and orientation of buildings in the community. Next slide. And so this is just an example of, with the exception, I said 1 to 3, but I realized that with the exception of the apartment condominium building that's at the southwest corner, everything else is pretty much in a 1 to 3 story kind of height. The images, though, do provide an example of the very types of uses and the scale of the built form that's found in the study area, including the service and commercial uses, the auto-oriented buildings, and the residential low-rise communities adjacent to the study area. So, next slide. As part of the work that our urban design partner is dealing with, they've provided a 3D model of the existing condition, and we've included this diagram in order to generally illustrate the existing street network and the built form within the study area, along with its sort of varied scale that I've talked about a lot here, and what their relationship is to the street frontages. So, as you look at the more residential use, it's quite obvious how it's a finer grain. It's a different type of relationship that you see. So it gives you an idea how different, obviously, the study area is, and because of its existing function, how it relates to the adjacent areas. It also clearly indicates that the only park space to be found within the Markville Secondary Plan area presently, which is the Markham Centennial Park. Having said that, now, just for another break from my voice, I will turn it over to Christine for our next question for this evening.
Great, thanks, John. So we're going to do another Mentee poll, and before we go into our question, just a quick heads up. If anybody has a question of clarification, Natalie, my colleague Natalie Armstrong, and I, Christine Furtado, are minding the chat throughout the presentation. In addition to the Mentimeter polling, we will also have a question period at the end of this presentation, so don't worry, we can answer your questions then. If you think of a question throughout the presentation, please submit it to me or Natalie in the chat, and I'd be happy to respond during question period with our team. Fantastic. Let's move on again to another polling question. What brings you to the Markville area? So I will get Natalie to show us the results of what brings you to the Markville area. McDonald's, shopping, home, Milne Dam, someone lives on Karma Road, Apple. I'm assuming that is referring to the industry or the company Apple. My boyfriend lives here. Okay, so visiting friends and family, shopping. There's also feedback in the chat, quaintness. Thank you, Harvey. Fantastic. Thank you very much for your feedback. Again, as the presentation continues, we will keep collecting this information. Someone in the chat also mentioned shopping and work. Passing through while cycling on a trail. That's fun. Some folks call it home or need it for medical reasons. And getting their car repaired. Great. Thank you for your feedback. In the interest of time, we'll move on to our presentation. Okay, at this time, we're going to go through a little bit more from John and hear about some of the existing conditions, and then we will have one more break for questions.
Okay, I'll continue with the background review that's been done for the study area, and in particular, when we look at employment and economic development, it's very important because it informs a lot of the work that we do. It explains to us a lot about the Bullock Drive employment area, and it informs a lot of the work that we'll do as we move forward. It's quite important for us to really understand what's going on within this employment area as compared to the rest of the study area. And a key objective is, again, to understand and evaluate Bullock Drive, the employment area, I should say, the Bullock Drive employment, in terms of what opportunities, what challenges there may be with respect to development within the Markville Secondary Plan. And I realize I've been switching back and forth from Markville Secondary Plan and Study Area. It's the same thing. I just didn't want to bore everybody using the same terminology, but just so that there's no confusion, it's the same thing when I mention those. What we know about the Bullock Drive employment area is that it contains a unique cluster of automotive-related uses and services, and currently it's actually one of the lowest density employment areas in Markham. But there's something to be said about that, and I'm going to mention it in the next few slides. Next slide. So when the Bullock Drive employment is designated as a service employment, which allows and proposes service and retail in the area. One of our consultants and our real estate and market consultant indicated to us that, speaking to the earlier slide, indicated that although it's low density and so on, it has a very low vacancy rate in the employment area, and that the rental rates are rising, which indicates that this is a healthy employment area and continues to be in demand. So it's an important thing to keep in mind as we move forward. And it's one of those bits of information and kernels of information that are very important in our development of the plans as we move forward. Next slide. Oops. So in terms of the opportunities, as I've mentioned, looking at it from an employment perspective, it's the population growth in and of itself may create opportunities for more varied services and retail in the area, not just auto-oriented. It may have a little bit more of a range. At the same time, it has the potential to increase the employment intensification, which, as I mentioned, is quite low, through additions to the existing buildings or through redevelopment of some of those properties. And most importantly, one of the things that has come up quite a bit is it may be a key area that allows us to build on the existing uses and to create, you'll see, an auto tech cluster, which in the city's recent economic development strategy, auto tech was identified as a growth area within the city's economy. So that's an important aspect to keep in mind. Next slide. And finally, the challenges for the employment area include how do we deal with compatibility issues? How do we deal with adjacent residential, not just existing, but any residential that we introduce, and the planned, sort of that planned residential intensification that is envisioned for the study area in all of the policy documents that we come across. And then the other challenge or the pressure typically is that because only a portion of the Bullock Drive employment area is included, there may be some pressure for what we call a conversion of employment lands, of the existing employment lands in the area. So these are things that we're keeping in mind as we move forward. Next slide. So turning to the natural and cultural heritage aspect, our heritage team has identified that only a portion of Milne Creek is within our study area. and that, being bound by the Rouge River, the study area being bound by the Rouge River, and that the study area itself, when we talk about the Rouge River area, it's a greenbelt protected urban river valley and policy. So these are important things for us to keep in mind as we're looking at the edges of the community and how we connect to them. And then our team also identified that the areas surrounding in some of these valleys and in the Rouge River area, that there's a long history of indigenous uses and activity, and that there may be some archaeological potential within those areas, not within the study area, but adjacent to it. And then you can see in the bottom photo there, the Sabiston House, which many of you know. Seen it probably quite often. I see it all the time when I'm in the area. Is as a resource, it's the only building that we identified as being listed on the city's municipal heritage register. Next slide. So in terms of community facilities, you heard me say earlier about the importance of understanding what impact there is on new development, and what does that mean for the types of services, the types of facilities that communities need. So, we notice right in the study area, we have the Centennial Community Center and the park that's adjacent to it. And this is quite very much a multi-generational community hub. In addition, surrounding there are 21 parks and open space parcels that are within 800 meters, or what we like to call a 10-minute able-bodied walk. So 10 to 12-minute walk. So you're within that range of a lot of park space. And the nearest public libraries are actually not that close at all. Not that 800 meters is very close for park space, but they're the ones that you probably do know, the Markham Village Library and the Unionville Library, which are 2 kilometers away typically. There are no public schools, obviously, within the study area, just because of what the function of it is, but we do know there is one private school that's located within the study area. And we do also know from the analysis that our community service and facilities consultant did that all the secondary schools that are further north from the site are all at overcapacity at the moment. And this image sort of gives you an idea of the surrounding. You'll see that the orange dots are the schools, and you see quite a few just north study area. We have a couple just to the east and southeast. And the only facility you see and park is what you see at the north end of the study area. So when we look at an image like this, we look at where are the locations for the various park spaces, schools, community facilities, see where the adjacent spaces are. This allows us to understand what additional community services and facilities may also be required within the secondary plan area as we develop the plans and understand the kinds of density and intensification that we have in it, but also where should those locations be within the study area, so that you heard me say earlier about how do we connect, how do we create a circuit. So where are they in relation to where should they be in relation to the existing network of parks and even the roads that connect those parks. So all that stuff becomes very important in providing opportunities for integration and connection, stitching in the community into the surrounding community, so to speak. Next slide.
Thank you, John. It looks like we do have a hand raised from Councillor Jim Jones. Councillor, is this a question that is urgent, or would we like to wait for a question period?
You're on mute, Councillor.
I'm just going to unmute Councillor. Yeah. And it looks like Councillor Amanda Colucci also has a question or has joined, so welcome.
But I'll let him finish. I'll let him finish, but I'd like to ask some 2 or 3 questions or comments.
Fantastic. I'll make note of that for question period, Councillor, and we'll carry on with the presentation. Thank you very much.
So next slide, yeah. I hope we spoke to this slide.
Community
I have
services and facilities, and we'll
Yeah.
move on to the next one then, John.
Yep. Right. So a really important item that comes up a lot now, previously too, but it's become much more urgent in the last couple of decades. But the affordable housing is an important consideration in the development of the policies and the location, appropriate location, and in terms of what we understand from provincial policy and regional policy and how it directs us. The provincial policy statement, it does outline key policies that guide the development of lands and ensures that we provide for appropriate, affordable, and market-based range and mix of residential types. Furthermore, from provincial perspective, the growth plan supports the range and mix of housing options that include residential and affordable residential housing. The idea being to arrange an array of households and incomes and ages and family sizes. Finally, the York Region and policy establishes a region-wide target for affordable housing, and what you see up there on the image itself is their housing solutions and homelessness plan. That's the York Region's 10-year strategy. That all these things are items that we need to take into consideration again as we move forward. And then the city itself has provided a vision and goals for affordable housing and its affordable and rental housing strategy, which includes and is not just limited to this, but these are sort of the highlights. It's increasing the supply of rental housing options, particularly for small and larger households with low incomes, stimulating the development of ownership and housing options to households with moderate and low incomes, and finally expanding the supply of purpose-built rental market units throughout Markham. So these are important things that we need to take into consideration, especially where we've got lots of transit, some park space that we can sort of build on in this new community. So locating affordable housing within the community is important so that there is access to transit, to green amenities, to the surrounding areas. How do we stitch it in and connect it? We don't want it to be something that's set aside, but we want it to be integrated really well into the community. The redevelopment of the secondary plan area provides an opportunity for an implementation of the vision and goals that the city's housing strategy sets out. And the strategy itself presents tools available to implement inclusionary zoning with the objective of increasing the supply of affordable housing and purpose-built rentals. Next slide. And can somebody be on mute? I'm getting a lot of background noise. So there is a variety of transit opportunities in the study area. As many of you may well know, our transportation consultant has indicated, besides the obvious of the GO Rail service at Centennial Station, the YRT Viva service along Highway 7 and along McCown Road. There's also a York Region Transit community route that exists within the Markville Mall itself, the parking lot, and the Loblaws parking lot further. There is, however, an opportunity in terms from an active transportation and transit component to improve the other modes of transportation along with transit, such as creating better pedestrian connections, including connections to and through large land parcels, providing for other forms of transportation, such as cycling through providing dedicated cycling facilities and lanes, and expanding and connecting to bike path networks. Next slide. From a municipal infrastructure position, that we don't have a lot to show you. There's still like a lot of work being done on the municipal infrastructure analysis. Some has already been completed. We're still completed some of the work for it, but there is a plethora of analysis currently that has been and is currently being undertaken in order to understand what the existing infrastructure conditions are, which includes, the sanitary system, storm drainage, stormwater systems, amongst other things, so that we have a baseline understanding of what the capacity is of the infrastructure network that exists in the study area and around the study area. See how what does that mean? Is there's a lot of times there's capacity available surrounding it as well, so that we can start to begin to develop some of our concepts as we move forward. As I said, it informs our concepts for the study area, and we can evaluate as we're developing the concepts. As we do the concepts, we understand, having had the baseline, we understand what additional pressure new development or redevelopment or intensification may have on those infrastructure needs, and what requires enhancement or improvement, so that we can provide that recommendation, that framework to the city itself. Again, it allows us to understand better how we're designing what could potentially go into Markville Secondary Plan. And I think with that, I'm done. I hope I didn't put too many people to sleep.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. Before we move into a presentation from our urban design lead, Dita, one last question for the group. If you could change Markville to become a place you visit more often, what would you add? So I'll ask Natalie to switch over to the mentee poll at this time. We do have a few messages in the chat around we need more green space, so perhaps that's a response that I can add to our minutes. Fantastic. I'll repeat the question for those on the phone. If you could change Markville to become a place you visit more often, what would you add? Parking fee, better transit. Think of infrastructure of Milne Dam itself. Okay. More control of leased and rented homes. I'm reading out some of the feedback I'm receiving in the chat. Thank you, Harvey. More affordable housing, entertainment, more green space, make it walkable, better traffic, pedestrian spaces, more frequent transit, 10 minutes or less. Thank you for that specific comment there. More information in the chat coming through. We've got folks saying more affordable housing, less traffic, more walkable, less congestion. I like clubs. Bigger mall, better park space. Thank you very much for the feedback. This will stay open. At this time, we're going to move on to hear from Brent Raymond, principal of DETA, and he will.
I thought we could ask the questions now.
Sure, we have a question period at the end of the presentation, but Councillor, if you can.
I wanted.
For sure, Councillor, go ahead.
First of all, I was going to do a motion to do the whole transit line as like, I believe that you've got to plan the line as you've got to plan the corridor, not just one individual station. My first question is, or my point, okay, I like to see Cadillac Fairview's plan, what they're going to do on their property, because I assume that they talked about this 2 or 3 years ago, so they probably got a plan. The second point I have is why, okay, I like the boundary of Laidlaw on the east and the backyard against the residential, but why are you not taking Laidlaw straight up to the tracks?
We've had this question before, Councillor. The study area is the study area that we were provided with. We haven't adjusted anything. We haven't defined that study area boundary. That's a boundary that was provided to us, and that's what we were working from in terms of what we're looking at. If the idea is that we should be including other portions further up, then it's something that we will obviously have to take into consideration and look for direction from
Well,
the
I'd like
city.
to talk to Daryl and Arvin about that then. The other thing you say about parkland,
Yes,
there is parkland on Austin Drive, which is on the other side of the subdivision, okay, the houses and just west of the condo. And it used to be a school site, and we converted to a park there. So it's not that far of a walk, okay, as a park. And then also on the south side of Austin Drive, I think that with a little work, that could be turned into, the north side is where I think it's rugby that's plays there, okay? But it is a park. And then on the south side, that could be, there's a lot of land there that's that could be converted to a park. Maybe we have to tank the storm pond that's there or something like that. But there is parkland just 100 or so meters, 150 meters from Bullock. Okay. And then I also, from my standpoint, like right now, the Stouffville line before pandemic, did 18,500 trips a day. I like to see that we're planning this line to do 300 to 350,000 trips by 2053. This is a significant destination station because of the Markville Mall, okay? And so that I'd like to want to make sure that it becomes a good destination, and also there's maybe some high-rise jobs that get located here too, okay? Because yeah, I don't know what. Right now, this station is just people park their car, go down in the morning, go down in the evening, and then there's the parking garage. Is there any is there any possibility that the parking garage right over to McCowan that could be reworked and the parking is there at the same time, maybe something on top?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I think these are wonderful questions, because there actually are a lot of questions we're receiving from the public in the chat right now. We are, in the interest of time, we're going to address your question, Councillor Jones, around applications and transit and density and employment. And
sorry, Christine, just one quick point.
Yes, Duran, go ahead.
For the councillor, just wanted to quickly jump in on the boundary. So the boundary for the Markville key development area is identified in the city's local official plan. It does define that to be the study area that is consistent with what is in the York Region official plan, as well as the intensification boundary. So we did provide that boundary to the consultant as the study area, consistent with the policies. However, through the study and technical analysis, we'll see if any of the recommendations that do come out of that work would support an adjustment to the boundary through a recommendation of the study.
Thank you, Duran, and thank you, Councillor Jones. Really looking forward to the question period, because a lot of questions are coming through the chat, echoing some of the questions Councillor Jones had. So to get there, I think before we do that, we're going to hear from Brent Raymond on what makes Markville a healthy and complete community. So I'd like to pass the presentation on to Brent. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So what was really interesting in the responses that people provided in the last poll started to highlight what people would like Markville to become. It's not necessarily what it is today. John did a great job in reviewing all of the various aspects of what's there today and some of the aspirations that the city has for what this could become. But one part that's stated in the official plan that in our mind as a term defines what Markville can become is a healthy, complete community. And there are different components that contribute to what that will be. So we're going to just take you through those various pieces and have a little bit of a discussion. So the elements of a healthy and complete community they really start with the physical environment. And it speaks to the quality and characteristics of the streets, the proximity between where people are and key destinations, the mix of uses that exist, the quality of all of the spaces, both the public spaces and buildings, how things are connected, and then the scale and the intensity and the quality of built form, but also the density, how many people are living within this place. So we're going to walk through each of these and just give a little bit more detail. So next, please. So when we speak to proximity, it's about having access to amenities like parks and plazas and recreation centers, schools, churches, shopping areas. These make up community amenities, and that can include being able to walk in a comfortable manner to the dentist or your doctor, having those types of services. So having things close enough together that it is simple and easy to move about. Next, please. And not only being close to each other, but having a way to connect between these various places. So not just about providing access, one possible way of getting there. We know that the street network within Markville today is not very supportive of safe and comfortable walking. So what we're wanting to do is make sure that there are a number of convenient and safe and enjoyable routes in which people can make the choice to move about. Next, please. So the characteristics of the street network that we're looking to introduce into Markville are safe, equitable, accessible, and beautiful, so that we are creating a place for all ages and abilities, that people from 8 years old to 80 years old will feel safe and enjoy moving about the street network in Markville Center. Next, please. And the quality of Markville and both the buildings and the space in between, how they inform the space in between, that is very important. It's just not about placing buildings on a site, it's about paying attention to the details. Next, please. So what we want to do is create a safe, inviting, comfortable, and visually pleasing environment. Next. And again, back to this idea of not only making a place for a certain demographic, but for all age groups, all types of abilities, and make this complete community so that everyone feels as though they are part of it and can contribute. Next. So a mix of uses. And what we mean by this is that it's not just all residential or employment or retail, that we have a full range or as wide a range as possible of the various uses, and often in a vertical way, that it's not just about spreading things apart, but having residential above retail, having office above retail, and making it so that people are closer to the different destinations and amenities. So this is part, again, connected to connectivity and proximity. Next, please. Oh, we jumped over a couple there. Go back to the built form, please.
Seems as though this is the last slide I have, Brent.
No, it jumped over a couple.
52.
Earlier ones, yes.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Built form. Sorry about that.
Go back a couple.
And one more, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So part of developing a complete and healthy community is to broaden the range of different building types that exist. It's not all about tall buildings, it's not all about low rise, but what we want to make sure of is that we have the broadest range of building types. And the reason for that is that we can accommodate the different conditions that exist within the center, but it also starts to inform the different kinds of tenure and ownership. So we can ensure the highest possible opportunities for affordability, for rental, for different, whether it's assisted living, seniors living, that with the full range, the broadest range of building types, we can accommodate the broadest range of uses. Next, please. But along with that, when we go through a redevelopment process, there is the opportunity to introduce a lot of these amenities to support the community that don't currently exist. There's only one large park in the area, but through redevelopment, there's the opportunity to add a wide range of different open spaces. We can have parks, we can have privately owned public spaces, parkettes, playgrounds, those things that don't currently exist. So redevelopment does provide opportunities to introduce these really important aspects of community building. And then the last slide, we've already gone over. So back to the poll.
Thank you, Brent. And I see we do have a hand raised from a participant, Anna. So similar to Councillor Jones, we have another hand raised from Anna. So Anna, would you like to ask your question during question period, which is now? Go ahead, Anna.
Sorry, I was having problems unmuting myself. My question, I'm right now I'm having an accessibility issue with your chat. My question is in regards to two parts. One, how did you engage people with disabilities? The last speaker spoke about accessibility issues. And what expertise did you use for guidelines around accessibility planning?
Thank you, Anna. I will turn that over to John, and then perhaps Dita and the city might want to add to that.
I would actually just add it to the city, but a lot of this setup for the engagement, this is really the first kind of public engagement that we've done. The idea was that we were giving different types of ways in which to provide that engagement. If we've somehow come up short, I would be happy to consider additional ways in which the public feels we should have also provided other ways to engage. We thought maybe we provided enough options.
That's a great point, Anna. And I'm going to take that away and action that for the team. In addition to computer and telephone and Zoom and the recording, which will be posted, I would be happy to receive more feedback on how we can be more accessible in how we run these meetings.
Oh, yeah. For example, I don't know if you realize, but when you offer to do consultations using this kind of platform, you're creating a barrier for people with disability issues. First of all, a lot of people can't even afford an internet, hookup, so they might not be able to have the software or the internet access that requires for a Zoom session. But for example, myself, I registered for this session. No one asked me if I had accessibility issues. So then I found myself having to sort of troubleshoot. Now, fortunately, I have some expertise in this area, but I would have liked to have seen someone say, when you register, do you have any accessibility issues that we need to consider for you to participate?
Thank you, Anna. I'm going to put that out to the city. If the city has anything to add to that, I think it'd be a good thing to take note of for our next meeting.
No, thank you for that. And I agree, Christina. And what we can do is we can take that feedback back to our team and work with our communications department as we proceed with the future consultation. But in the immediate future, Anna, if you want to leave your contact information, we can definitely reach out to you to ensure that you can get all the materials and any questions or comments that you have regarding us kicking off the study. As John said, this is our first engagement opportunity with the public. It won't be our last, and we're looking to provide many forums to allow for comment and feedback from the public.
So how did you seek expertise regarding accessibility issues?
So through the consultation process, we do work with our communications department, and in putting together some of our presentation materials and slides, we do aim to ensure that they do meet the AODA requirements. But if we have fallen short in any of those elements, please, we do want to receive that type of feedback, and we can take that back to them and kind of discuss how we can improve moving forward.
And also, just to add to that, Duran, I think Anna too, we were hoping that we would actually be meeting in person. I don't know if that makes any difference, but that's where the challenges are, holding community information meetings in a virtual state. It's very hard for us to be able to ensure that we've got a great way to communicate, but it's a point well taken. And then we definitely will do better for the next event if it's not in person and we have to rely on.
I think my
virtual.
my question was more around your planning process. You identified requiring expertise, for example, in transportation. I would urge you to consider that you might want to identify that you need expertise in accessibility planning. It's anyone that's got an accessibility issue, when you're walking around the Markville area, there are so many accessibility issues that were never dealt with. I consider it an area of expertise, and I urge you to add that to your list of experts.
Thank you, Anna. I think it would be wonderful if you don't mind if the team can follow up with you for more information. That would be wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you, Anna.
Sure, no problem.
We do have another hand from Donna. Donna has a question, and then after Donna, we're going to move in and answer some questions that I will read out loud that have been submitted through the chat. So Anna, go ahead with Donna, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when you talk about Markville Mall, are we going to get rid of that? Is that because shopping centers are no longer in vogue, or they're not being used? And would that property, would Fairview Cadillac, would they be selling that property for redevelopment? Like, I'm kind of confused a bit. I know there's a lot of parking lot around the actual mall that certainly could be used, but is the idea to get rid of the existing Markville Mall eventually?
Thank you, Donna. Similar to that question, I'm going to piggyback on that question around, are you getting rid of the mall? What's going on with the mall? Why do we need this plan? I know Michael Gagnon had a question about why do we need this plan? What's the purpose of the plan? A lot of questions about the mall and other large land holdings. So I'm going to direct this one to the city staff to respond to.
Thank you.
I can answer that, and then if there's anybody that can follow up from the development side of things, I can do that as well. So in terms of why we're doing this, the city has an official plan to guide growth and development, and where and how to grow within Markham. And so in the city's official plan, we have identified Markville as an area that requires a secondary plan for guide growth and development in this particular area. And these plans provide more specific land use policies for areas, that require greater detail for land use, infrastructure, transportation, community services, and so forth. And they are required beyond the general policies provided in the official plan. And so if we look at the official plan and the policies, that also directs, the things that we want to see in this area, for instance, protection of the greenway, comprehensive master environmental surfacing plans, diversity of housing types. I know there was a question about housing, affordable housing, sizes and ranges, and protection of cultural heritage resources. And so, as noted in the presentation, is to plan for a complete and healthy community for those that live, work, and play in the area.
Thank you, Liliana, and thank you for the question. We have another question for our team from the chat this time. This is a combo question, comes from a member of the public and also from Frank, and it focuses on density. So perhaps this is a good question for our urban design team and city follow-up. So the question is, what is the current hectare per person and what are the current hectares for employment? And further to that, Frank is asking about density. Can we discuss density? Really specifically, if 200 people per hectare is what we're looking at, and if we say the site is 110 hectares, is 22,000 people correct? How does this break down into jobs versus residents? So perhaps John and or Brent would like to start with that response on density.
Sure. I don't know if I can go first. I think what's important to keep in mind is that's a density target that's been set out through policy. That's not us coming up with a number. When we're going through the project, we'll be able to understand because we'll understand what happens when we leave the mall in there, what happens when it's reconsidered. But in terms of the density, that's why I was sorry if I went over it very quickly, but it was just to identify that these are policy requirements. It's been identified both by the region and by the city as an area where that type of density should go into. And yes, if you look at it, it's not just people, it's 200 persons and jobs. So the idea is that you're looking at more density, and if it's from an employment position, I think the councillor had mentioned earlier, about can we get more intensified kind of employment uses in terms of taller or office buildings and so on. So the idea is, as a complete community, and in order to support the transit, just so you understand from the perspective of the region, that's usually at the low end in terms of what they're expecting in terms of in terms of the number of units. It's and I shouldn't even say that it's at the low end in terms of the number of persons. It's right in line with what is outlined for most major transportation station areas, which a large part of this is, and ensuring that we've got the density that not only supports the transit, but the transit that supports the density. So it's a little bit of a couple of things. So with that, I'll stop and I'll let Brent add anything that I may have missed or say it more eloquently.
You said it just fine, John. I'll say that we haven't begun testing anything yet. So we don't know where those numbers are going to lie. We need to go through that exercise. But once we do, then we'll be able to use those numbers to understand what are the infrastructure needs for this place. What is the amount of parkland? How many schools? How many daycares? Inform the servicing infrastructure, informing the transportation work that needs to happen along with this. And all of that needs to get balanced. So it's not just about seeing how many people and jobs we can put in here. It's about, again, making a complete community. We need all the bits and pieces that contribute to that. So we're just at the beginning of moving into that stage. We don't have an answer yet, but we have some guidance as to what is anticipated. And now we need to go and see, well, what will that actually look like?
Thank you, Brent. Another urban design related question. This one came really early during this meeting today, very early during the meeting, and it focuses on the relationship to the street. So it's a question from Brendan. It asks, what is meant by having a little relationship to the street? Can you elaborate on what a greater relationship to the street may look like for this area? Brent, did you want to take that one?
Sure. What we find in Markville today are primarily buildings set quite far back from the street. And what happens in that case, with a lot of parking in between where the pedestrian would walk on a sidewalk along a road and the building. But what happens when we bring buildings closer to the street, they start to contain the space. You begin to feel more comfortable. and within a space, as opposed to feeling as though you're walking in the middle of a wide open area. And it's a fairly basic human response to walking. So if you go to think of your favorite downtown, your favorite main street, whether it's in a big city or a small town, those buildings are usually right close to the sidewalk. Then we start talking about, well, what are the uses that happen at grade? Are there shops? Are there cafes? Are there restaurants? Are there fishmongers, the fresh fruit stands? Where are the places that you can see into as you're walking along the street? That starts to create the vibrancy, that mix of uses, and the ability of people to walk to those places. So it is a bit of a recipe that we start working with. So by having buildings closer to the street, that's one of the easiest things that we can start to do in looking at how this place will develop over time.
Thank you, Brent.
Hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Brent. That's great. We've got one more question in the chat, and then we'll move on to some folks that have their hands raised. This question is for the city, and it's more around why is the study happening? Came really early in the chat around defining the study area under review and about the condos near the corner of Bullock and Highway 7. So the question is, how do you define the study area? How did the city define the study area? And why does it include condos on the corner of Bullock and Highway 7, which are somewhat densified? Are these buildings at risk of being replaced? So I'll send that question over to the city.
Hi, Christine, I can take that one. I think it just follows up on the response provided earlier to Councillor Jim Jones' comment with respect to the official plan being the driver for the study area boundary, which identifies Markville as a key development area. So the boundary has been defined. I don't have the full history in terms of the apartment site, but from what I understand, that application came through some time ago, and through this plan we're looking to work with new and existing uses, so those apartment buildings will be taken under consideration as part of the secondary plan with respect to the existing context, but we wouldn't be looking to replace those buildings.
Thank you, Duran. And thank you for the question. We'll move on to Tristan. Tristan's hand is raised. Tristan, I'll unmute you. You can ask your question, please.
Hi, I would like to know, is there any quantitative goals that this secondary plan is trying to accomplish? Like for something like the revenue for businesses, are they going to increase by how much, or and number of new residents in the area, and maybe the transit ridership? Are we expecting? Is there any goals for like 50% increase in transit ridership? And also, is the area is going to be a net balance on the city of Markham balance sheet? I mean, some of these goals is important for us to evaluate whether we did the secondary plan correctly.
Thank you, Tristan. For everyone on the call, I'll just reiterate. So the question was around, and to make sure I got it right, Tristan, are we doing any quantitative analysis? So actually measuring outcomes. A lot there, Tristan, around transit and ridership, around the quantitative economic benefits of this study, and as well around net balance. So I think maybe we'll turn to our technical team. Perhaps Brett might want to talk to the transit piece around whether we are measuring ridership or doing any other quantitative, and then we'll pass it back to John with respect to other quantitative outcomes that we might be analyzing as part of the study.
Thank you, Christine, and good evening, everyone. Brett Sears from WSP. I'm our transportation lead. I live in Markham. I'm in Cathedral Town area, and I was just at Markville Mall over last weekend. So this is an interesting project from a professional perspective, and just as also a resident of this great city. Certainly, we need to increase transit to make this area work better. One of the counselors mentioned in the chat that this is one of the busiest intersections in the city already. And in the future, there could be more people or jobs in this area. And as we are just finishing our existing conditions analysis, as we're looking to the future, we want to do everything we can to enhance transit. Councillor Jones had mentioned like greatly increasing the number of people using the GO train station. And we want to improve the connections between the GO train station and the services along Highway 7 for the Viva that's there, and also just services north and south on McCowan Road. At this point, we haven't, from a transit perspective, like set a goal for like the number of transit riders, or even just like the percentage of people using transit or any mode for that matter. But we know to accommodate the future plans that we're starting to put into place or looking to put into place for this area, we need to have a better balance. We need to have more people taking transit or possibly walking or biking to balance this network so that not everyone feels compelled to go by private automobile. It's just not sustainable to continue that way. So we don't have a specific goal that we're trying to meet at this point, but we are certainly having the goal to focus on sustainable travel. And part of that is going with the land use, as Brent Raymond was talking about, in terms of like bringing buildings closer to the street to create that environment that people want to walk or other modes of transportation. No specific goal for transit, but certainly an emphasis on sustainable transportation as we look to the future. That's how I'd like to answer that, Christine.
Thank you very much, Brett. Hopefully Tristan, that answered your question. I don't know if John wanted to add.
It probably answered on I'll try and speak a little bit more. Tristan, that's why I was saying a lot of the work that we're doing right now that we've done up to this point is to get that baseline understanding in terms of, I mentioned that about the infrastructure. So we have to know what the impact is. But what we're going to do with the information that we have thus far, with what we hear from everyone today, is we're going to be developing concepts that we can then start to measure. We can start to say, these concepts generate this much gross floor area of residential, this much gross floor area of retail, however it may be, in addition to what's either already there or what it could be. So when we get that information, then we're able to say, if we introduce this many more persons, this many more jobs into this area, what does that mean? That's where Brett started saying, well, what does this actually mean for transit? Can it actually increase the support? In a lot of communities, it's measured by when you're able to provide a certain threshold of riders, you get better and more constant, a much more, what am I trying to get? I'm getting all tongue-tied, but much more frequent service. So all those things start to play in, but we're not doing that analysis. What it is that we're looking at the Markville Secondary Plan area. We're going to be taking the information we know, developing concepts on what we understand are the constraints and the opportunities. We're going to come back to everybody with that information eventually, and to present it. You'll have a chance then. And then we'll also, at that point, we'll be able to provide measurements. And what do I mean by that? Again, what impact does it have in terms of transportation? You heard me talk a lot about active transportation. What is that split between the different types of modes of transportation? Sorry, Brett, if I'm getting to your area, but and then also what enhancements is the infrastructure as it exists? Is it acceptable, or does it need to be enhanced or updated in many ways? So those are all the measurable things that I can think of right now at this point when we're doing that type of work. And of course, there is a cost in the end. And most importantly, and I'll end here so I don't take up too much time, we do have a market and real estate analyst as a sort of a check in terms of what it is that we would be proposing to sort of do a reality check on what is the existing market, what is the future market, how does this part of Markham work, and what is realistic in terms of the types of uses that we introduce.
Thanks, John. we'll move on to, and thank you, Tristan, for the question, and Brett for also the response. We'll move on to Michael. Michael and a few others in the chat, a lot of questions around the mall and asking the consultant team to draw upon experiences on the redevelopment and redesign of malls across North America, particularly Markville, around sort of the retail ratio and what can we expect with the mall. I know this is not the forum for site-specific application questions, so just in terms of etiquette, just putting that out there. But I'll ask Michael to come off mute because I know you had a few questions related to this that you would like to elaborate on. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you very much, Christine. So this is somewhat an unusual secondary plan. Our other secondary plans that are currently in process, like Markham Centre Secondary Plan, Mountjoy, etc., there's a lot of undeveloped areas. This area is almost fully developed. And so in that context, my expectation and reasonable understanding is we're not going to do anything to the Hunt Club and associated condos. I doubt we're going to do anything significant with respect to all that employment land. And so doesn't this really boil down to what does Cadillac Fairview really want to do with that mall? And perhaps also the strip malls that to the south of that might be a potential for some specific planning. But these are all owned and operated properties. The employment area is all owned and operated. Those strip malls are already owned and operated. So what are we really talking about here? And if we are trying to respond in a broader picture to some specific proposal from Cadillac Fairview as the biggest landowner, then I've got a couple of questions. When will we see their proposal? Because that sounds like it's much more interesting. And then secondly, are there other large landowners in the area that this would affect? Because otherwise we're down to, committee of adjustment issues. So
thank you, Michael. I'll turn that over to John and then let the consultant team to add to anything else for John. Go ahead, John. You're on mute, John.
There has to be at least one you're on mute. Michael, thank you for the question. As I think I mentioned before, this is basically has been identified in policy and the official plan as a secondary plan area. We haven't predetermined what can and what can't occur. We know that obviously Cadillac Fairview being a very large landowner has some impact, but we have to sort of consider the rest of the properties, the rest of the study area. And what does that mean in terms of how we tie it in? Because the area that's within the key development area, as it's been identified by the region, and that's within the study area, is an area that doesn't, although it functions in some ways, it's in some aspects, it could be considered to be quite underutilized, considering, as I mentioned before, the high order transit that's right near it. In order to make better use of any of those as a planner, I always worry about making best use of those those heavy investments that are made both by the municipality and by the province. So it's imperative that we take a look. I think to say that everything's a foregone conclusion, I haven't gotten there. I don't know yet. I don't know what the conversations with Cadillac Fairview might lead to as well. I don't want to presuppose that they want to develop or don't want to develop some or all of their property or none of their property. I mean, that's making some pretty big assumptions, and I'm not Cadillac Fairview, so I can't make that answer. But the hope is that in our interactions and as we move through this process, that we start understanding how what they may think or what they might propose, how does that tie in with the rest of what we're looking at, and how do we sort of help create the framework for this? Because that's all that we're really doing. We're creating a framework that guides development, suggests to the property owners where intensification should go and why it should go. It's not just coming out of the air somewhere. There's a lot of stuff going on in the area. It's completely actually changed, and the land uses have remained as they are. and the rest of the city's grown up all around it. And I know Markville Mall quite well from quite a while back, over 20, 30 years ago. So it's a changed area, and it's important, it's imperative that we take a look at it and make sure that we're making efficient and good use of the land, especially when it's next to so much transit and really is in the heart of this general area. So.
Thank you, John. I know we have a few hands going up. A lot of hands have been up for a while. I really appreciate the patience, and a few folks have joined really late. Housekeeping item, yes, this is being recorded. Yes, this will be available on the city's website, if not tomorrow midday, end of day tomorrow. Michael, thank you for the question. We're going to move on. Braden, I know you've had your hand up for a long time, and then we'll go to Councillor. So Braden, go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. You can hear me, right? All right, we're good.
Yes.
All right. So first of all, I'd like to say that I'm pretty impressed by the city's attitude towards fundamentally changing Markville to be more livable at the human scale rather than just for cars the way it is right now. Yeah, hearing everything today and seeing the responses from councillors too is really exciting as a young person, especially in Markham. And I'm really hopeful that this will be a successful transformation because I love the city. But in its current state, it's extremely unlikely for myself and other people my age that we'll actually be able to live here after we become adults, and we usually would have to probably go up somewhere north where we can actually afford it. Moving on to my actual question, York Region recently completed an environmental assessment for McCowan Road, which is contained within the entire area for the secondary plan and beyond too. Viva Next is also planning an extension of the dedicated bus rapidways east towards the recently completed Cornell bus terminal. What I'm wondering is, how are these plans going to work in conjunction with the Markville Secondary Plan, and will this delay or change the construction that's planned for the improvements for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers along McCowan Road?
Thank you, Braden, for your question. It also ties into a question from, I'm just making sure we get everybody. It also ties into a question in the chat around the open house for the McCowan Road upgrade and how it's being integrated into the York Region McCowan Road study. So I'm going to pose the question to the city, as it is a project unrelated to this one. So if the city could respond to Braden's question, that would be great.
Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Samson from the city of Markham, and I'm the transportation lead for this project. That's a great question with regards to all the planned road improvements and transit improvements surrounding the Markville area. Certainly, these improvements would be taken into consideration as we develop our transportation analysis and network plan. I just wanted to clarify that these improvements are not within this jurisdiction of the city. It's under the leadership by York Region and York Region Transit. So this is something that we will have to continuously to work closely with our partners to identify the timing and the phasing of these projects and see how it could accommodate and support growth for the Markville Secondary Plan area.
Thank you, Samson, and thank you, Braden, for your question. We're going to move along. Councillor Jones has his hand up. Go ahead, Councillor Jones. And you are muted, Councillor Jones. I'm going to ask you to unmute your microphone, please.
Yeah, I said earlier, is Cadillac Fairview at this meeting? Because I have met them 3 years ago, and they're not planning on tearing down the mall at all. They're planning to use the parking lots that there for redevelopment. And I don't know why you folks don't know that, okay? And Reed McAlpine is on here. He can probably substantiate that too, okay? It's just, because they did, I was looking at on the Canada line in Richmond, they did the same thing. They had a mall there and they redeveloped the mall and left redeveloped the land around the mall and left the mall. And it's a line and it's a station on the Canada line.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Again, around that question, I'm going to pass it to John. John, you're muted, to provide a response around some of the questions we've received with respect to this Cadillac Fairview.
Yeah, I think what I was saying, Councillor, is that I'm we are aware of some initial designs that Cadillac Fairview has prepared, but that doesn't mean that that's the final thing. We're still trying to figure out how this works out in totality for the whole area and how that would work. And so there will have to obviously be, as being the largest landowner, some sort of interaction that and interface with what we're proposing for the rest of the study area and how that would function with what Cadillac Fairview, and try and come to some sort of integrated approach. I mean, it's not unlike doing when you're dealing with two different subdivisions on either side of a road, and they come together to understand where the connections are, what the overall idea is. So when I'm looking at the secondary plan area, I'm quite aware of who the large landowner is and the kinds of opportunities and constraints that might produce. But I can't speak on their behalf. If Cadillac Fairview wants to speak to it, that's fine. But I mean, I'm not going to speak to what their design is. I have to think about the rest of the secondary plan area, understanding that how do we create this mixed use integrated community that is envisioned both in the official plan in Markham from 2014, it's not new stuff, and what's envisioned from the region, and what's been identified again in the official plan as being this important key development area. And so, we obviously have to deal with the various landowners, and although they're the largest, there are other key landowners in key locations that we will obviously have to engage.
Well, Loblaws has a big hunk of land there, the building, and then the parking lot beside it, and they're right beside the GO station. So I don't think that we initiated this study to do nothing. I think we initiated this study to replan the area.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
If I can just follow up on that. Yeah, and that's why I was saying we're now going to move in the development concept phase, Councillor. And so you're going to be able to see what it is that we're thinking and what the rationale is behind it. We're not just putting things in places just because that's what we think would be good. We will have a real rationale as to why we would suggest certain types of uses, certain types of densities, even certain types of heights. You've already heard us talk about having a position on how buildings relate to streets and how do we create more connectivity. So all that stuff will show up.
Can I speak to this for a second, please?
Yeah.
So good evening, everybody. I'm Daryl Lyons, Deputy Director, Planning and Urban Design. So Regional Councillor, you're absolutely correct. The whole point of us doing this secondary plan, it's a key development area. We're looking at the ultimate growth for this area and what should be appropriate within it. We have been having conversations with Cadillac Fairview. They're part of the process. They're going to be throughout this process. I do not foresee that the mall will be going anywhere to sort of put people's anxiety sort of down on that point. But what I do see is we do need to be looking at this area in its entirety, not only for the fact of what the potential is, but also for the land use compatibility, the fact that the context has changed from when we did the official plan. We now have a major transit station area here with population employment density targets. We have a new context. We have a New York Region official plan. We want to implement elements around the affordable housing. We need to be looking at the interface between employment as well as residents and the connections in between all of that, making sure we have appropriate open space, retail, et cetera. It's great that we have this anchor here with the Cadillac Fairview Markville Mall. I understand it is a very profitable mall. I understand that it is going to be here, and it's something that we are working very closely with Cadillac Fairview through this process as well. We are looking to achieve great planning outcomes and city building objectives in this area.
And Daryl, the other thing is that's the reason why I want to see what they've done, because they have good architects, good planners, and let's see what they've done. Maybe we'll like it. I don't know. Or maybe it'll be compatible with what we're trying to do. So the first thing we should be doing when we have these meetings, have the major landowners come in. If they have ideas, show us what they're doing.
Thank you,
Yes,
Councillor
Regional
Jones.
Councillor. On that, we are working very closely with Cadillac Fairview. We are working at ITM. It is going to be an ongoing piece throughout this exercise of the Markville Secondary Plan process. So you will be seeing pieces. I know Cadillac Fairview is excited to bring things forward at the appropriate time as well. So we will be looking at those integrated pieces.
Thank you, Daryl, and thank you, Councillor Jones. We have quite a significant number of comments from the public in the chat as well. And I'm going to take a question from the chat, and then we'll go back to some folks that have their hands up. So there are a lot of questions around residential land uses and around housing and housing affordability, coming both from members of the public as well as Councillor Rhea. So I've conglomerated all the questions, and I'm going to pose this one to around residential and affordable housing to the study consultant team. How do you define affordable housing for this project? It's the first question. So we'll take that one to the consultant team, and then I'll provide you with the second question.
I think, in fact, Christine, it probably would be better directed to the city. The city does have its affordable and rental housing strategy. We are doing an affordable housing analysis specific to the secondary plan area to indicate, again, as we go along, to indicate criteria and guidance with respect to affordable housing in the study area. It's still early in the process. I know that, and Daryl, you can probably confirm this for me, but I know that typically the municipality uses the provincial guideline for it, which I know most won't will say that doesn't happen, but it's 30% of gross household income for low and moderate is one of the ways that affordable housing is identified for some of it. I know some of you are concerned that quite often it's identified as 80% of market, but I'll let Daryl, rather than speak over that, if you can add to it.
Sure. So, John, I think you hit it on the head in the fact that at this point, we have a York Region official plan as well as the Markham official plan. The definitions of affordable mirror that of the provincial policy statement, which is a required document to be consistent with in our planning exercises. And it does use the 30% of gross household income for low and moderate income households. That is also the definition we use in our affordable and rental housing strategy. But what I suspect is where the councillor is coming from in the question is the fact that recently, through the provincial changes in legislation, they've introduced a potential definition, and we're still waiting for regulations to be coming out to help us better understand around what affordable is. It seems to be doing a bit of a disconnect from the income decile and making it just to a market rate, which I would agree is a bit troubling. And it's a departure from where we have been. And I would suggest that at this point, we are maintaining our framework because the minister approved the York Region official plan with the definition of affordable that we were just speaking to. So we'll be looking at that, but we will also have to be nimble depending on where the province goes with future regulation.
Thank you, Daryl. We have another question, a raise hand question. So I'm going back and forth in terms of when I get the questions in the chat and when people raise their hands. So next in queue is Hayden. Hayden, would you like to ask your question and come off mute, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thanks. So as everyone knows, the Markville Mall area is quite congested every single day. And I don't know how are we going to solve this, but the whole Markham is basically car oriented very, and the fact that most people own cars is a problem. What plans does the city of Markham have to actually really bring down the car ownership rate? Like the city of Markham has a minimum parking requirements for developments. Have Markham consider having a parking maximum in this area or even the entire city, so that less people can own cars and more people can use active transportations, and also provide active transportation alternatives. There's not even a sidewalk west of on Highway 7, west of the condos right now. what's the plan for really improving the active transportation environment and really making the area more like a street instead of a stroll. Like right now, Highway 7 in McCowan is basically a stroll. They carry out all the traffics, but also all the functions. People, it's basically making a dangerous environment for everyone, whether or not they are driving or they are walking. I just want to know what the team is thinking about that.
Thank you, Hayden, for that question. So just to unpack that, Hayden, to make sure I'm hearing correctly, the question is, I think, two or maybe threefold. First, around transportation and the reliance on the automobile and what the study will be doing with respect to active transportation. And then the second was more specific around parking and parking needs and parking minimums. So I think that two-part question, the first one, which is more general around what we're doing with transportation and active transportation, I'll get that over to Brett Sears, our transportation expert, to respond to. And then the question with respect to parking, I think I'll give to Samson from the city. So Brett, if you'd like to respond first.
Thank you, Christine. Part of our work that we've been doing to date has been to look at the existing conditions and identify gaps. So as you noted, there is a gap as if you're on the north side of Highway 7 and you're heading west away from McCowan and 7, beyond Bullock, as you head toward Kennedy and then eventually Main Street Markham, Main Street Unionville, there is a gap there. And so we are identifying those gaps. If you go on the east side of McCowan and north of 7, some of the streets have a sidewalk on one side, but maybe not both. So as part of our plan, I can envision us coming up with a recommendation that we need to have sidewalks on all of our streets, on both sides of all of our streets. We have beautiful facility for cycling through Austin Drive, the Austin Drive Park, which has been mentioned before, and you can go under Highway 7 on that. But we need to make sure it has connections to the Foodie Mart Plaza on the south side, and connections from the Austin Drive Park into our study area as well. Now there's an elevation change there. If you've been in the Austin Drive Park, you're quite a bit below the street level of Austin Drive. But we need to identify, and we have been identifying, the missing gaps in the network, both for walking and for cycling. And the next step will be, how do we want to address those? Even if you're taking transit, as much as McCowan and 7 is one of the busiest intersections for cars in the city, it's also one of the busiest ones for transit. But if you're going to the Markville Mall and you get off at McCowan and 7, you don't necessarily have an easy route as a pedestrian to go from the transit stop into the mall. You're going to have to walk across the parking and be careful of all the different cars that are moving. And so working with our urban design colleagues, and Brent Raymond has spoke here tonight, we're going to be looking to increase pedestrian, call it permeability, or just the number of pedestrian paths that are through the study area so that people feel more comfortable walking. And we have to provide some cycling and dedicated facilities. The city has been moving more and more to like separated facilities that are, say, above the curb. It could be a multi-use path or other measures, a cycle track. You might have seen in other places. So that is certainly part of the future vision, to make those modes of travel more convenient, to give people, a broader group of people, the desire to use those modes of travel, so that people have viable alternatives to driving. They might still drive. I mean, we're not here, we can't just say you cannot drive, but we want to give them viable alternatives. And one of those solutions can be on parking, and in determining how much parking to provide, to not over provide. But I'll stop there and let the city, our colleagues there, if they want to address parking in terms of future parking rates or whatnot. I think that's the second part of the question.
Thanks, Brett. We'll turn it over to the city to discuss any plans they might have with respect to parking now.
Thank you, Brett, and thank you for the comments. This is a good segue into discussing parking. So I think one of the part of the question for parking is, do we have a minimum standards for parking rate requirement? So currently we do have a citywide rates that provides guidance on what the minimum parking rate should be as development arises. But as part of this secondary plan exercise, we need to think about the future and how we can use parking or manage parking better to achieve certain modal split target. What that means is how much people do we want to move them away from driving cars and have them take transit, walking, and cycling. So all that will have to be factored in when we develop and review our parking rates. At this point, we're still early in the study and we haven't gone to the analysis part, but we certainly welcome the comments you provide and questions with regards to parking. And this is certainly an area that we're looking to develop a strategy for. And certainly part of the outcome of the secondary plan is to come up with some guiding policies for parking and to also develop strategies, TDM strategies that would encourage people to walk, cycle, and take transit. Thank you.
Thank you, Samson, and thank you, Hayden, for your question. Going back into the chat in order, we have a question from quite a while ago. This one is around infrastructure and the infrastructure asset specific to Milne Dam. So I'm going to throw this question to the city's Manager of Natural Heritage, Tony Acabelli. The question is, thinking of infrastructure, is Milne Dam itself in good working condition? And is it maintained, or is there a concern of it potentially failing and causing future issues?
Yeah, thanks, Christine, and thank you very much for the question. So Milne Dam Conservation Park is owned by the Toronto Region Conservation Authority, and they take their responsibility for managing flood areas very carefully, and they manage the dam as well in an agreement with the city. So I can't speak to the details, but I do know that they manage their responsibility extraordinarily carefully about flood areas, and we can take that question back for more details.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for the question in the chat. We're going to go back into the hand raise. We have Hattie. You've been raising your hand for quite some time. Hattie, do you want to come off mute and ask your question to the team?
Hello?
Hello.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that something like this is very exciting to see. It's great to see this sort of stuff planned, especially near a future GO RER station. And I just wanted to point out that as part of GO expansion, this part of the line is actually getting a quarter of the frequency as what Unionville will be getting. So my question is, will the city of Markham be pushing Metrolinx in the province to extend frequent GO service to Centennial Station?
Thank you, Hattie. The question is specific to the city's plans with respect to Metrolinx and GO. So perhaps transportation planning, either Lay or Samson would like to take that question on in terms of Metrolinx and what's being planned.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of improving the service level for transit on the Stouffville GO line, this is something that the city have continued to work closely with Metrolinx to address the demand. We really welcome your feedback tonight, and this is something that we will have to take it back and share the feedback with our partners at Metrolinx to see how we can better improve the service and also address the future demands that will come as part of the Markville Secondary Plan.
Thank you, Samson. And there was a few questions in the chat around, I know we discussed McCowan, around whether or not there's a plan for an overpass or an underpass. So I hope that the response provided is sufficient. Thank you, Hattie. We'll move on back to the chat and then we'll come back to the hand raises. So we're going back and forth here. This one is more related to urban design. So I'm going to throw this one over to Brent. A lot of the presentation slides are quite beautiful. That's what this person said in the chat. Thank you very much. However, a lot of the vision is focused on summertime images. How would this secondary plan benefit the community during the winter? So Brent, would you like to respond to that question?
Hi, Christine. Yeah, thanks for that question. we wouldn't approach this any different than we would in a winter city. And we would essentially want people to walk in the winter. There's no reason that you shouldn't or can't. That we would want to make sure that the walking environment is sheltered. Again, the buildings being closer to the street helps to provide some protection to people as they're going along their way. Accommodating safe cycling infrastructure within the streets so that if people choose to bike in the winter, and if you look at all the places in Canada that have introduced dedicated cycling facilities over the last number of years, that winter cycling is going up. So that is not the impediment that people once believed there was to introducing that. Making sure that we are planting vegetation in a way that it helps to provide protection. But a lot of it does come down to the details. At the secondary plan level, the best we can do is really focus on making sure that we have the structure and the framework that's there to support walking and biking in a safe and comfortable way for all seasons. And then the built form guidance that we will provide will do its best to ensure that we are in the winter months having as much sunlight penetrating and getting to the street where people are as possible. So there are things that we can do at the secondary plan level that will then get advanced as it moves forward into the next stages of design. But thanks for your comment. That was a great one.
Thank you, Brent. Moving along, again, this comment was really early on in the presentation. It's a land use planning comment and around zoning and residential densification. So I think I'm going to pass this one to John. The question is twofold. One person was asking, how many residential units are being proposed for this area and specifically the mall area? McCowan and 7 happens to be really high area for collisions with pedestrians, and safety is a big concern. There was also a question, so that's the first part, residential safety. The second part is around whether or not the city, as part of this study, is exploring zoning bylaw tools, particularly form-based codes for community character, to make sure that the built form in this study area is of high quality. So John, maybe we'll start with the residential units that were being proposed as part of the study and the safety question, and then we'll move on to zoning bylaw tools.
Sure. As I said, we haven't gotten to the point where we've generated the plans in which we would get sort of that density number. As I mentioned before, though, we do know that the target for this area is 200 persons per hectare. So quite often that means that we're at least getting to something in terms of units per hectare. If you divide it by 2, you're getting about 100 units per hectare. If it's by 3, it's about 6. So it's not a really big number, but we don't know what that number is yet. It's based on like a lot of things, what the average persons per unit is, how many units we were able to get, what's the average size for a unit that's realistic and appropriate in the Markville context. So that will come. We will have those density numbers eventually, and you'll be able to get a sense of it. But I think somebody had already mentioned, if there's 110 hectares, does that mean 22,000 people? Not necessarily, because there are a lot of things that we have to take out. There are a lot of areas that are not going to be touched probably. And so once you think about all that stuff, it starts to reduce what we're looking at, what the density is. But we don't have a density number exactly. We just know there's a target that's been provided for us. From a safety perspective, what we're hoping is with our transportation team and our urban design team, that and as we hopefully create a much more pedestrianized edge, especially along Highway 7 and so on, then how hopefully there are some things that we can introduce that help in that regard. But I'm not quite sure how to answer your safety question, to be perfectly honest.
Anyone else from the project team perhaps want to speak to safety around transportation and pedestrian safety? Brett?
I could chime in a little bit. Thank you, Christine. For safety, there are some perhaps quick wins that can be done. In some cities, the pedestrian signal will go before the vehicle signal. So for instance, if you're trying to cross McCowan or Highway 7, the pedestrian walk sign can come on 5-10 seconds before the vehicles get a green, and that puts the pedestrian in the street and easier to see. That's a small something that can be done. Maybe not 10 seconds before, but a few seconds before, just so that the pedestrian has better visibility. As my colleague Sampson mentioned, these streets are under the jurisdiction of York Region, and we have to work closely with them. And one thing that's always in our mind is, can we reduce the crossing distance? But in order to accommodate some of these plans, that might not be the case. And so we'll have to look for these other items. Can we give the pedestrians a head start to get them in the open so people can see them better? And also, just overall, we want to improve the pedestrian experience. Like I had mentioned, fill in missing gaps in the pedestrian network, so that you're not walking on the side of the street if you're on Highway 7 and that missing gap west of our site. Different items like that. Some are quick wins, some are bigger. And then we will be working, as John said, with our urban design team to try to put together the land use, the design, and the transportation to work as one cohesive unit that will hopefully also address some of our safety concerns. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Brett. And then a question to the city around whether they're looking, this is a zoning bylaw question, so perhaps unrelated, whether there are form-based codes or any zoning related tools that are being considered as part of the study. So perhaps briefly, someone from the city can respond to that.
Thanks, Christine. I could take that one. At this point in time, we're not looking at any specific form-based tools with respect to the Markville Secondary Plan Study, but we can take that comment back and examine if that's perhaps one of the implementation tools that we could see as a recommendation come through the final study.
Thank you, Duran. So we've only got about 15 minutes left. I want to be very respectful of time. So we will take Jonathan has had his hand up for a very long time. Jonathan, we'll take your question, and then we have about 5 more in the chat. Jonathan, go ahead. I'll ask you to unmute.
So I appreciate that, like, there's a commitment in the plan to reduce the mode share for driving and increase the mode share for like public transit. But one barrier to increasing transit mode share is that the current frequency of the bus routes here, particularly Route 129, are very low at about every 20 to 30 minutes. And this drives away a lot of riders who would otherwise take the system because it doesn't get them where they need to go on time. And in order to achieve the transit mode share that's outlined in the plan, will the city of Markham pressure YRT or TTC to increase the transit frequencies in the area in order to achieve that goal?
Thank you, Jonathan. So I believe this is a question that Brett might be able to respond to, and then a follow-up perhaps from City's transportation planning team.
Sure, Christine, and Samson might want to add to this. Certainly, we are going to advocate for increased transit service. We would love to get this to the level where you don't necessarily have to know the schedule. You just walk out to the street because you know a bus will be coming relatively soon. You can do that on a number of streets in Scarborough. Like if you're on Steeles, like the buses come fairly regularly there, and some of them are express and some of them stop every block. Finch, you can do that as well. So can we get that to happen as well in our study area here on Highway 7 and on McCowan Road? that's something that the city does not directly control, but this plan will be advocating for that, and it can be used as a tool to work with YRT and TTC to improve that service. It is really essential to helping us meet where we want to go. If we're going to densify this area, we can just say right now, even before the analysis is done, we cannot just all drive. I drive in that area sometimes myself. Like I said, I live in Markham. I have biked through there. I have taken the bus through there as well. But we have got to make it easy. I had a colleague once that said, colleague, when do you take transit? He says, when it benefits me. So we have to make it easy. You don't even have to check your watch. You know that a bus will be coming relatively soon. If you miss one, no big deal. Another one's coming pretty soon. It will take more investment. And so we're going to have to work with the transit providers to address those type of concerns. And I imagine maybe Samson, that might be part of your answer, but if you'd like to add to what I've said, I'd welcome that.
Yeah, certainly. I think you have given the answer that I wanted to give. But I just wanted to add that, as part of our transportation study, we will look at transit capacity needs. And certainly, depending on the outcome and the level of density that we will achieve here, this will provide us with further justifications to go back to our partners to help justify the need to increase the service level to support the future growth. So certainly, we will have to conduct study on our end to find out what that future demand is, and we'll have to take it to our partners and to have further discussions, and we'll have to advocate for improved service levels along McCowan.
Brent, yes, go ahead. Brent also has a response.
Yes, I just wanted to touch on one of the things that I said in my part of the presentation about one of the benefits of redevelopment and intensification is that transit service, to make it more frequent, you need a higher ridership. You just can't ask a transit provider in the same way you can't ask a grocery store owner to come into a place where there are no customers. So with redevelopment and more people living and working in this area, that the likelihood of supporting that increased transit service is there. It makes it more attractive to everybody to increase their service. Doesn't matter who the provider is. So that is one of the benefits of intensification redevelopment that we can't lose sight of.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Brett. And thank you, Samson. And thank you to those in the chat. A lot of feedback coming in that we will collect as the project team around Highway 7 buses being empty, around safety concerns at McCowan and Highway 7, and other transit service requirements and minimums. So thank you for that around discussion around transit. We have one more question that's asked pretty a long time ago in the chat, and then I'll go to Michael because I know you have your hand up again. So this question is really just a general question of clarity that I think is important that we ask the team. The question is in the chat, says, I'm not clear on what is projected to happen to the Markville Mall. Is this included in employment opportunity? Could you please provide some clarity on the study in terms of its the employment opportunities that are going to be looked at? So I know, John, you did speak to employment quite a bit as part of the presentation. Would you like to respond to this question? And you're on mute.
Sure, I'll take a crack at that. In terms of, I think you've already heard in terms of the Markville Mall, and I think Daryl had also mentioned that it won't be going anywhere. So to sort of answer that, I think what we're being tasked with is to understand the employment area that's east of McCowan that is now pretty much focused on auto-oriented uses, and what that could mean over time. What does that mean? Like, in terms of maintaining those uses, is there a more intensive way of having those same uses, having them there, providing potentially for more employment, but how do you make full use of that? You've heard a lot about transit, you've heard a lot about things. So it's not just about moving residents, it's also about, are you providing sort of that threshold, that number of employees that may use an area, and you're not going to do it with low slung, small sort of functioning service or retail. A lot of times you're looking for something a little bit more intensive. So again, we're at early stages. We haven't really come to a conclusion as to what that might be, but as I mentioned in the presentation earlier, we're looking at what are the other opportunities. And you heard me mention about the burgeoning auto tech sector and how Markham is actually involved, and there's a lot of investment in that. And because this is auto oriented, is there the possibility that this could be something more, or that it could include something like that? Could it include that type of function, but be closer to McCowan or Highway 7? Or so those are the types of things we haven't concluded yet what that might be, but there are things that we have to consideration. And then, of course, we do have our market and real estate analyst who will help us with some of that, just so that we understand that. Because as it stands right now, it is a very according to the information we're getting from our consultants, it is a very successful employment area. So how do we build on that or take further advantage of it?
Thank you, John. I am being asked to wrap up, and I know we have only about 3 minutes left. Michael's had his hand up for a while. Michael, I know if you have a brief question, we'll go there, and then one more question in the chat. That being said, I do want to end on time. So if there was something that wasn't responded to today, we will be preparing a summary as part of the engagement program for this project, and the city will be able to provide responses in the summary of this meeting, and this meeting is also being recorded. So Michael, if you want to come on mute and briefly ask your question, and then we'll go to our final question after that.
Great, thank you very much, Christine. My question is about supermarkets. So I cycle, I walk, but I don't see anybody doing their family grocery weekly shopping on their bicycles, and you certainly can't walk unless you live near a supermarket right now, and certainly not by public transit. I also understand through the Markham Centre secondary plan, there are no current supermarkets planned within walking distance of that GO station. So to follow on from Regional Councillor Jones' question, let's take the Centennial station, and let's then say that as a result of this new secondary plan, the city, decide to rezone the Loblaws area and its associated parking. And as a result of that, we then get some high rises, fine, okay, makes sense. However, what do we then do across the city? How are we going to protect sufficient supermarkets with adequate parking for people to do their weekly grocery shopping? Because it's my understanding that the city does not have the zoning or bylaws or whatever capability to insist that there should be supermarkets. It's market driven based on what the developer thinks they can actually sell to their renters. So how are we going to protect our ability to do supermarket shopping with our car?
Thank you, Michael. So the question is related to, just to reiterate, parking and supermarket shopping, and a lot of it around parking has, I know we've discussed this with Samson, and I want to direct this question to the city. So either transportation or perhaps Daryl, if you'd like to provide a response to Michael.
Hello, everyone. This is me again, Samson, from Transportation. So when it comes to parking, we do have zoning bylaws that provide minimum requirements for retail use. So as new development comes in, and if new supermarket comes in, then we will have to assess the uses and determine what is the minimum requirements for let's say, supermarket. So as I discussed earlier, as part of this exercise, we are looking to develop a parking strategy specific for the Markville area. So, we haven't done any in-depth analysis yet, but, we can certainly take a closer look into supermarket and to make sure we find a balance in terms of what that parking strategy would look like for this specific use. Thank
Fully
you.
understand, Samson, but really that wasn't the question. The question was, how do we protect the supermarkets in the first place? Not how do we actually take a bus to them? Because right now I don't believe that the city has the ability to insist that certain areas, how do we protect supermarkets? And I see Councillor Jones has his hand up as well. I quoted, Jim, so maybe he feels like he wants to respond also.
Thank you, Michael, for that. It does look like Jim's on the phone. We do, in the interest of time, I do want to move along if that's okay.
I just want to make a quick comment.
Okay.
The mayor of Stouffville today said that Walmart is starting autonomous vehicles to deliver groceries.
Interesting
So
feedback
we're
there.
talking about groceries. Probably by the time we do something, they either Walmart or Loblaws will be using autonomous vehicles to deliver the groceries too.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And Michael, I think the preservation of supermarkets is a question I'd like to take away. And if not, if you're comfortable, happy to have the project team follow up with you on that. I do want to be very respectful. It is 8:30. We do have some other questions around implementation that we're going to cover in the next slide. So I want to just say thank you, everyone, for quite a fruitful discussion. I really appreciate your time. In the interest of time, the study team will be drafting development concepts and policy guidance as the next step in this project. This is not the only time you'll be able to ask questions. This is not the only time we will have discussions. This is very early days. So additional stakeholder and agency meetings will occur. Stakeholder meetings have been occurring with a lot of variety of stakeholders in the study area. The project team will be drafting an interim report. And again, we will continue to engage and consult the community. This is just the first meeting. So thank you very, very much. With that, I'm going to close the meeting and send the closing remarks to Duran from the City of Markham.
Oh, thank you, Christina, and thank you everyone for spending the evening with us. We really appreciate you providing feedback with us on the study. We think it's very important to us developing the secondary plan. And as Christine said, this is really our first outreach to the public, and we do anticipate that we'll continue to engage and reach out to you. So we wanted to let you know that we do have a visioning workshop coming up on February 3rd, 2023, so in a couple of weeks, and we'd ask that you visit the Your Voice Markham webpage for Markville. That's markham.ca/Markville, where you can continue to provide support and input to us through the feedback tool and the places tool so that we can continue to get some of this great feedback. So just wanted to thank you very much, and hope everyone had a good night, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on this exciting project.